Hello, welcome to AMAZE Live. I am Christine Coe, your host, and I am here with two spectacular guests, Dr. Wilkinson and Sarah. Hello, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Well, listen, World Contraception Day is coming up. There's just a lot going on in the news, and so I sort of feel like we should dive right in because we have a lot that I'd love to talk to you guys about. And it's pandemic, and so we're all juggling all the things. So I would love it if you guys could start out by just giving your lightning quick, bios for people who are joining us.
Dr. Wilkinson, go ahead. Oh, thank you. So I'm Dr. Wilkinson. I am a general pediatrician. I live in Indiana, and I do primarily research on reproductive healthcare access for young people.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Sarah Michal Hamid. I'm a student and feminist organizer based in Hawaii.
And working out of LA right now, right? Yeah. Well, I'm so appreciative. One of my very favorite things about doing this broadcast is learning about and learning from incredible guests like you. And so reading up on you in advance of this broadcast was really, really exciting for me. And I'm going to dive right in because I have a bunch of questions for you both. And I'm really grateful that you'll be able to lend both, Dr. Wilkinson, your experience, both, in the field, like in medicine as a researcher, and then Sarah, all the work that you're doing as an activist. It's awesome. So let's dive right in. Okay, so the pill, like everybody knows what it is or should know what it is, but as I was reading up for this, it's kind of crazy. It's been around for 50 years. It is one of the safest and best studied medications on the market, but access is still an issue. And I actually, until I was prepping for this, I hadn't realized that over 100 countries already have access to over-the-counter birth control, and the US is not one of them. And that leading medical groups do approve of the idea of it going over the counter. So why are we so stuck on this issue?
Yeah, so I'm happy to answer that. I think that one of the things to remember about the United States is that we do have regulatory rules on how medications are received and available by patients. And so when the birth control pill was approved many decades ago, it was approved as a prescription medication. And so there are rules and regulations in order to switch that to medications over the counter. Other countries went forward with their regulations differently. And so that's part of the reason why they've had over-the-counter access for a lot longer than we have. And unfortunately, despite all of the professional opinions that it is, safe and it should be over-the-counter, that's not sufficient. And it does take time to make the application go through the whole process, anywhere between 5 to 7 years, actually, from beginning to end.
Oh, that's so I thought it was 3 to 4 from when a company like a pharmaceutical company would submit to the FDA, but is it long, that runway is longer?
Well, I would say 3 to 4 once that application is started by the pharmaceutical company, but the whole process, finding a pharmaceutical company to do that, et cetera.
Yes. Okay. All right. That's a lot to think about. So, well, Sarah, I would love to hear from your perspective. What do you feel like are the key challenges for young people right now? When I think back to when I was a teen or a young person, like just everything was a little bit different too with access, and my family didn't even have health insurance. So I would love to hear like what you're hearing on the ground from young people as top concerns regarding birth control.
Yeah, I think the number one concern that is the big A word is access. It's a really big problem, even if there is a prescription available, but you have to go see a physician, or you have to go see a pharmacist to prescribe it to you. So when we're thinking about the most marginalized young people, those that are Black and Indigenous and people of color, those that are living in rural areas, our queer community members, they may not actually have the ability and access to go into a doctor's office to get a prescription. They may not have health insurance, like you mentioned. And those are all barriers that prevent young people from accessing the pill. And so that's why bringing it over the counter would basically eliminate that major barrier to accessing it.
Dr. Wilkinson, do you have thoughts about sort of this access problem, specifically, and I guess that also as it's playing out with the pandemic and the fact that that's limiting people going, in to see their doctors?
Yeah, so I actually used to live in Los Angeles, Sarah, and moved to Indiana. And if you want a really quick tutorial on how access it differs around the country, move from a blue state like California to a red state like Indiana, and it's really clear, So in Indiana, we have non-comprehensive sex education. We have not an explicit right for contraception access. And then we have been deemed one of the largest contraceptive deserts, which means that there are vast geographic areas in Indiana without even a clinician to prescribe contraception. So you add in all of those layers, and it's not surprising that access for young people in this country is not a given. And it's a lot harder to navigate the health system on your own if you don't have a guardian or a parent helping you do that. For the first time, to navigate the system and find birth control is really hard. And I would say that my field does not make that any easier. As a clinician, I do not make finding my clinic from the parking lot easy. I do not make making an appointment easy. I do not make getting a prescription filled at a prescription easy. And so there's so many steps and barriers that have been in place that it's not really surprising that a solution to that would be to put the, autonomy and decision-making back into the hands of the people that are going to be using this medication by making it over the counter.
Yeah, well, I think that is incredibly fascinating to hear about the difference. You're pointing out the difference between, blue to red state and access. And, I think another huge issue, among the myths that sort of come up around birth control in general, are any stigmas that people might have. And I think safety is one. So I'd be curious actually to hear from both of you, if you hear, I think a common concern is whether over-the-counter birth control would even be safe. So I'd be curious to hear kind of what the young person's perspective is on that. And then also, Dr. Wilkinson, your perspective as a physician.
You go ahead.
So that is a great question, Christine, and a question that I get a lot from patients and also advocates and people that are interested in this topic. So there's two things that I like to first of all explain. So there's the birth control pill that most of us have heard about and are familiar with. There are actually two types of birth control pills. So there are progestin-only pills, which are often called POPs for the acronym, and then they're combined oral contraceptive pills that have two hormones, estrogen and progesterone. So the movements right now to get a birth control pill over the counter involves a birth control pill that only has progesterone. The reason being is that medically, there are very few people that cannot take progestin-only pills. They apply and are incredibly safe. And we have hundreds of countries that have been having over-the-counter birth control. So we do have data as to safety and efficacy in terms of using it over the counter from other countries. So what I do say is that it is safe, that women and young people are able to kind of decide when they need this and maybe whether they qualify for it, and that the side effects of it are not substantial when you compare it to a pregnancy. So let's not forget the safety and risk profile if somebody were to accidentally get pregnant is much greater than the safety and risk profile of a birth control pill.
That's a really good distinction. Sarah, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the idea that the birth control pill is as a medication to be abused is a really weird concept, because when I think of people that are trying to access over-the-counter birth control, I don't really think of someone that's looking to misuse it, right? It serves a very specific purpose, but it also can treat a wide array of symptoms that may not be pregnancy preventing. When I think of people that access the pill, it does span beyond pregnancy prevention, and a lot of these symptoms are self-diagnosable, like dysmenorrhea, extremely painful periods, or having a heavy flow. Those are things that can be self-diagnosed because we know our bodies best. And young people, we know our bodies best because they're going through a lot of changes when we're young, and so accessing a medication that isn't meant to substantially, impact your life, but really meant to manage symptoms, that's something that really should be in our hands. And if there is like you said, there's such a low potential for misuse. If that exists, I think that that young person would understand that it's within their power to address that,
Yeah, that's excellent. I realized I forgot to say at the beginning of our broadcast, and I wanted to encourage anybody who's joining right now or on right now, that if you have questions for our wonderful guests, please drop them in the comments, or even, a high five emoji or what have you. I will be monitoring comments. And also for our guests, a number of people will come to the broadcast after. So if you have questions, drop them and I will wing them to the right place. Okay, well, so my mind is turning on a lot of things, but and Sarah, originally this was a question I was going to just pose to you, but I'm eager to hear both your thoughts if you both want to weigh in. I think one thing that people like to put in play as an argument is whether teens should be able to get on medications over the counter, for something that has potential side effects. So I guess the question is, what are your thoughts about teens accessing, birth control over the counter, something that might have some side effects without their parents' knowledge?
I think teens should absolutely be able to access medication that has side effects because we are autonomous people, we know our bodies. And the idea that at 18, boop, the day we turn 18, suddenly, our parents absolve their responsibilities and we have to become, self-sustaining individuals is a really archaic idea that actually does more harm than good. And so if we're training young people to embrace the responsibility and accountability of getting to manage your own health, that does wonders for people. It really does treat us. It treats the individual like an individual who is competent, who can make decisions based on their health. And then later down the line, when more bigger decisions have to be made, they feel more equipped because they've actually been given an opportunity firsthand in their life to be able to decide.
Yeah, Dr. Wilkinson, what would you say to parents who are kind of wrestling with this, because I think it's honestly, and as a mom myself, I think there is this sort of oh my gosh, my kid is growing up, or oh my gosh, I'm kind of losing control of the situation. I actually think it's about quite a bit more than the actual medication itself. So, what would you say to parents who are kind of locked up in that feeling of loss and control there?
Yeah, I think I would reassure them that that's totally normal, especially at a moment of a pandemic, right? We have no control over anything, it feels like right now. And that part of your child growing up and becoming an autonomous individual that does not need you is hard. It's supposed to be hard. And if it wasn't hard, then I would actually be worried as to the feelings and connections between that parent and child. It is hard to let go of some of that decision-making capability, but I actually tell parents in my clinic that, we would never hand the keys to a 16-year-old to drive a car without telling them what to do. And just like we expect our young people to grow up and make happy, healthy decisions about their health, that reproductive health conversation should be no different than all the other conversations that you're having with your child, soon to be adult. And so I would look at your child soon to be adult and look at this as a moment of empowering and being a partner with them and sharing that decision process with them, but also trusting that they know what's best for themselves and to support them in whatever decision that might be.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And I will just say, it's kind of funny, but it's kind of not that I think, parents right now are at a point where we can equip our kids with so much, and everybody I talk to who's kind of my generation is like, oh yeah, I had nothing. And I will just, for levity and because it's a real life example, share that I literally had my first birth control conversation with my mother. I'm 47, she's 84, about 3 weeks ago. So I'm could have used that 30 years ago, Mom, thanks.
Yeah.
But earlier is better is I guess my point. And I think, yeah, there's a lot in it. So, Dr. Wilkinson, when I was looking through my notes prepping for this, I was interested to see that there are, different criteria for how we talked a little bit earlier about the timeline of something going over the counter. And birth control actually meets the criteria in terms of pretty low potential for misuse and abuse, as we talked about. and that you can use it for self-diagnosed conditions. Advocates for Youth is commenting, never too late for the conversation. But there are still two criteria that I think are in question or in play right now. And one is that it can be used safely and effectively without a healthcare provider's instruction. And it can be adequately labeled for safe and effective use. So I'm curious from you, given your research background, if you have a sense of like where does research stand? Where is the progress on those particular two issues as we sort of think about, how long it can be, what's the runway to getting this over the counter?
Yeah, so those studies deciding on like actual use and how it works for young people, but also all people that could access this over the counter, are what is happening right now. So those studies take anywhere between 3 to 5 years to complete and present to the FDA. And they're about halfway through. And so we're in the midst of that recruitment right now and examining the data. I can tell you that, in the past, similar studies, for example, on emergency contraception, did the same thing. And young people were able to read those labels, to understand the labels, and to use the medication correctly. And so I'm pretty positive that these studies are going to show the same results as similar medications in the past have done.
Okay, so since we've opened the door now, I wasn't going to ask you this because I didn't think we had time, but I think we have time. So research of yours around emergency contraception actually led to like some serious change. Do you mind just sharing what that is?
Yeah,
pretty big deal.
Yeah, I'll piggyback a little bit on what Sarah said earlier. So, we have all these birth control methods in medicine that are available, but whether they're accessible is a whole different question. And so when I was younger, I'll just leave it at that, when I was younger, I kept having patients coming to me, asking me for emergency contraception and needing a prescription, or having these weird stories from pharmacies in terms of accessing emergency contraception. And so as a researcher at the beginning of my career, I kept wondering if this was, a small problem. Was this just a couple of rogue pharmacies in our area that were maybe not providing access to young people, or was this something bigger? And so we designed a study where we had young people and physicians call every single pharmacy in 5 different cities, and determined, not surprisingly, that while the medication was available at these pharmacies, it was really hard for a young person to access it, so to get their hands on the medicine when they needed it. And so I was honored to have some of our research cited in the federal opinion that decided that all of these restrictions are not evidence-based, they're not based on health reasons, and so that they should be removed. And that the research shows that when these barriers exist based on age, you are inherently blocking people from being able to access this drug, which we know is safe for them.
Wow. I was going to just bring up Free the Pill, and they just dropped a comment. But so Sarah, I want to turn it over to you. So first, like, all the applause and snaps, Dr. Wilkinson, that is amazing. And I used to be in research, so like I understand the cycle and how long things take. So, Sarah, I'd like to kind of move to activism. I know you are part of working on the Free the Pill Council. World Contraception Day is coming up, although this is something we need to be fighting for like every day. And so why do you think it is, talk about why there is urgency around this right now? Even with, I think it can be hard when there's a bit of a runway, like in terms of years when something actually can be available, to kind of like keep your energy up on it. So like, why is it urgent, and how can people do something? What would you advise to, a young person or parents who are watching this and are like, I want to do something?
Yeah, so I think too often my generation is treated as the generation of the future, right? We're always kind of told that we're going to have to handle all the problems and the climate change and all of the neo-fascism that's happening in the world. But we're actually the generation of the now, and right now we are organizing and we are on the ground more than ever. And right now we need birth control. We need over-the-counter birth control. And so while it is a long fight, if we get organized now and we get connected, we set our goals where they need to be, and we ground ourselves in like that collective community of people that want to see young people free, that's going to guide us, right? That's going to prevent a lot of the burnout. I feel that sometimes it's really hard to remember the goal, right? And the goal is very clear, right? We want over-the-counter birth control. We want it now. And while it's going to take a little bit of time to get there, what young people really can and should be doing is organizing in their local communities, right? Like reaching out to their pharmacies, reaching out to the universities, the health centers, the clinics, and asking the questions that need to be asked, right? Like, okay, so you have this medication available. Why is it not being accessible? Why is it not being readily available to those that need it? And sometimes it might be readily available. It's just the process to obtain it is a little bit complicated, right? So kind of working and grounding ourselves in community education. How and where, which pharmacies will you be able to access this medication at? You know, kind of building relationships with the people that are going to sustain us throughout this long fight. That's really, really imperative. And that's something that I really appreciate about the Free the Pill Council and Advocates for Youth, is that they're training us and helping us ground ourselves in this long fight, while also making sure that we're attentive to, you know, the present needs.
I just want to show you. So yes to all of that. Somebody says they are loving your We're a Generation of the Now. Somebody's going to put that on a t-shirt, just so you know. So I really, really love, and just want to like underline several times what you said about getting active local, because I feel like that is where all the change starts, you know, and I mean, that's where we can make the most direct impact that we will feel, and also just dig in. So, and I'm curious, I'm going to look at the Free the Pill website a bit more after, but I'd be curious if they have, and I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, Sarah, you obviously like know the thing to say when you pick up the phone, but I think that is one thing that is daunting to people when they want to get on the phone, and like, even if they're going to call the Capitol switchboard, like people feel better with scripts on hand. And we certainly, you know, at AMAZE Parents and amaze.org, we see that all the time. Like parents are just like, please tell me exactly what to say. So I'll dig into that and link anything I find up. Dr. Wilkinson, what are your thoughts on how parents can also, you know, advocate alongside, you know, young people to make a change here?
Yeah, I think parent voices are so important to be simultaneously there, because I do think sometimes this conversation assumes that they're on the opposite ends, right? That young people would want birth control and parents don't. And so I think if we can have voices together talking about how this is good for us all and how it's important for us all, and that this aligns with our values, regardless of whether you're a parent or a young person, would be amazing.
So I was delighted to see, Dr. Wilkinson, as I was, you know, looking around at the New York Times, that you were quoted in an article this week. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it was about the pandemic and the impact on teen or young people, I think, but relationships. I'm curious, and actually, I was originally just going to ask you sort of, you know, about an important message you would want to convey to parents in how they can support teens in relation to birth control, rather. And then, Sarah, I'm also curious about, as a young person, like, what would you want to hear from a parent? Like, if you're, I think parents sometimes don't know what to say, and then also young people are like, they just don't get me. So I kind of want to hear it from both sides.
Yeah, I think, I'm not going to say that this conversation is ever easy for a parent, but if you can open the door to being a trusted person in your young person's life, you will never regret that. Because there will always be moments and decisions that if they feel like you are the person that they can trust to confide in, you will enjoy being in that circle of trust more than you know. And so in that New York Times piece, I said that I was trying to make the point that if parents assume that this is not a conversation to be discussed, they ultimately will be surprised, right? Becoming a sexual being is part of normal human development. It is not something that is timed to a certain age or a certain date. It's just normal. And so encouraging the normalcy of that and making sure that you are having open conversations with your young person about questions they might have or resources they might need, or maybe they do want to go talk to a clinician about birth control, and you helping them get there is important, even more so now in the pandemic when we have more time together because we're all stuck at home. But navigating the healthcare system is super tricky right now because, you know, a lot of doctors' offices are not doing normal visits. They are doing telehealth visits. So how do you even navigate that as a young person? And so that's what I would encourage parents to be doing, is to use this opportunity to build on a relationship and to build on trust in that relationship.
Yeah, and I will, just from the parent perspective also, because I think about this stuff all the time and my kids are probably sick of me, but I will just say to parents, like, short conversations and like do them while you're driving around, or like not, you know, take the pressure off. These are going to be multiple frequent touch points through life. It's never one big sit down. Nobody wants the big sit down. Sarah, your thoughts? Sarah, your thoughts from, like, you know, what would be the ideal words, supportive words that a parent could say, you know, to a young person right now in relation to birth control?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna steal something that my mother actually told me when I started taking birth control, and I started taking birth control not for like the fun reasons. I was experiencing really horrible, painful periods, and was basically undiagnosed with endometriosis for about 5 years, which is a really long time to suffer in pain. Yeah, but she. When I started, you know, taking it for medical reasons, you know, the one thing that she said to me that really resonated with me was, you know your body because you know yourself. And that regardless of the reason why I was taking the medication, right, it's that I got to choose to take the medication, and that it was a medical decision that wasn't just influenced by the higher powers, my parents, but it was a decision, right, that I was not just a part of, right, but autonomous in making. And I think that, like, you know, like Dr. Wilkinson said, like, you know, there's going to be a point where your child is going to grow up. And if you want them to grow up feeling very insecure in their ability to make decisions, especially about their medical, you know, the medical realm, about their bodies, then you shouldn't have conversations with them if you don't want them to feel comfortable. But if you do, you want to raise like a healthy, resilient, responsible child, a young person that feels like that they have the power within themselves to make those decisions. Those frequent and short conversations are really going to help you out. And I think also just making sure that you remember, right, that even though it might feel embarrassing, even though it might feel awkward, there's nothing embarrassing about talking about contraception. Nothing embarrassing about talking about sex. There's nothing embarrassing about talking about sexuality, right? We really try and like stifle the normal things in our life, right? We try and stifle reality, right? And it's led to not great outcomes, I would say. You know, it's led to not great outcomes. And in order to really like dig at that system, right, to deconstruct this idea that these are taboos, we need to really start it within our interpersonal relationships with the people that brought us life, you know, that gave us life.
Oh, yes. Yeah. All right. Well, I want Sarah and Dr. Wilkinson, I want you guys to sort of formulate your last closing thought while I just put up Sydney here asked, how can young people get started when it comes to organizing their communities to fight for over-the-counter birth control? And I will just also share a comment from Free the Pill, Yay Free the Pill, that they are doing virtual visits with members of Congress today in commemoration of World Contraception Day. So the link is right there, but I'll also share it separately, freethepill.org/act for ways to take action. Presumably very cute graphics and talking points and other information. So that is
they're very
really, yeah, they're always cute. They're always super cute. So that is awesome. I didn't know those the virtual days were happening right now. So I know you guys are super busy, and please, if anybody has comments, this would be like the final live time to drop them, or if you're coming to this broadcast later, please drop them and I'll make sure that Sarah and Dr. Wilkinson get them. But is there like anything major, a final closing thought that you guys have, some like either a tip or a piece of information or something related to this topic that, you know, you would really like to drive home today?
I'll let Sarah go first.
Not much comes to mind. I feel like we really covered it all, but I think the piece that we really need to drive home is that we're the generation of the now, you know, and these things are happening now. These obstacles are happening now, and it's up to us more than ever as young people to lead, right? And to lead forward in a movement that fights for our liberation in all forms. And this is one of them. This is big forms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that, Sarah. I'm going to use that line of the generation of now. I really, really, really love it. And then I would just add that, you know, advocacy can be in lots of different forms. It does not always have to be meeting with your congressman in Washington, D.C. It can be a small piece of advocacy, including helping your friend figure out how to get birth control if they don't have a trusted adult to help them. And so remembering that everybody has a role in advocacy, and that it can be small and it can be big, but it all matters.
Yes, I'm so glad that you said that too, because, you know, just today I was having a conversation with my podcast host, and we were talking about this very thing, how in this day and age, I think, you know, people like think of the word influencer and they think of like professional internet people, but all of us have influence, and it's in those little moments of conversation with our friends or family members. Like that's where we're going to move the needle too. So back to Sydney's, you know, question about getting organized in communities. I mean, part of it is having those conversations like right around you. So important. Well, I cannot thank you both enough. Like this has, I'm energized and I'm so grateful for your wisdom and the thoughts and the passion that you brought to this conversation today. So thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
So much for having us. It's such a
yes. All right. Yes, and somebody said advocacy. We can and should be advocates. That is absolutely true. So friends, if you are joining us, we're about to close off the live broadcast. If you have questions, you're coming to this broadcast later, please drop them in the comments. And as always, you can see other past AMAZE Live videos at our videos tab here on Facebook. And thank you again, guests. You are wonderful.
Thank you. You are wonderful too.